Okay, Oni, welcome back to SOM.
Yeah. Hey, thank you.
I know you're under demand here, and every day and every week, another faculty member or student or dean asks you back. So we're truly grateful for your generosity.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm excited to have you in class today. And right now, I'd like to have a conversation with you for the Coursera students to meet you and learn about your work, because I think that you are one of the few people I know that has worked in every single sector. So you were an entrepreneur yourself in the private sector, then you worked in academia, then nonprofit, civil society, and now government.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot to share. So tell us about your current role and what it is that you're doing.
Yes, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. So my current role, I'm Executive Director of CTNext, which is a quasi-public organization based in the state of Connecticut, here to catalyze and support groundbreaking companies. So as a quasi-public, we have the opportunity to be funded from the state, but also have the leeway to kind of reimagine how we deploy capital in ways that are innovative and really meets the needs of the entrepreneurs and ecosystem that we're trying to serve. We try to do 4 things relatively well. 1, workforce development, workforce placement. 2, support entrepreneurship support organizations across the state. 3, provide various forms of capital, and we can get into that later. And then 4, really try to create more competitive and resilient sectors that Connecticut has an advantage in. InsurTech, financial technologies, biotech, things of that nature.
Cool. So what does quasi-government mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. So essentially means that we're funded from the state, but we have the opportunity to generate revenue and do a series of programs and practices outside of what we consider like standard state mandates.
Ooh, so you have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I like to think so.
Today I was talking to someone, I don't remember who, and I was like, yeah, Oni funds this and Oni funds that. And they're like, wait, is it like out of his own pocket? It's like, no, it's the government's money.
Yeah, taxpayer dollars. I appreciate y'all.
You're welcome. Okay, so tell us about how, I want to hear a little bit about how the work you're doing now as a funder, and then I want to hear a little bit about as an entrepreneur did you ever seek funding and how did you navigate that? Because I think students will be interested in seeing from both ends how you're innovating and changing the funding landscape.
Yeah. So, at CTNext we have a variety of ways to deploy capital. Again, thinking about how we serve particularly groundbreaking companies, which we define as growth-oriented and innovation-driven, which what other people would call just VC backable. So we have something called the Entrepreneurship Innovation Awards, which is just a statewide business plan competition that we're trying to reimagine to be a lot more streamlined based on sector. So prior was kind of a catch-all, anyone can apply and you can get various amounts of money. Now we're saying, okay, if you're in insurance technology, if you're in the food sector, something particular for you. So we can bring the wraparound services, not only capital, but human capital, social capital, mentorship, those things that you need for
I love that. So it's financial and non-financial support.
Completely.
And I know that Connecticut historically has been a leader in the insurance sector, so that's why you keep bringing it up. And more recently, I think in the food sector, like so many of my students are interested in nutritional justice and access and everything. Yeah,
and that's something that I'm really excited, and I saw while I was at Yale as well, that there's more opportunity and more startups and more entrepreneurs playing a role in that sector. So again, that kind of goes back to one of our strategies. What does it mean to create the environment for businesses in that sector to win and be competitive at a national and global scale? So we have the EIA, the Entrepreneurship Innovation Awards. We have something called the Growth Grants, which we're actually in the process of reimagining, which is really exciting. Prior, it was you're eligible to get a grant if you've seen 20% growth over a course of 3 years each year. So 20%. Due to COVID, that isn't a lot businesses qualify under that. So we're really trying to reimagine what that financial tool looks like to meet the needs and just the real implications of just down years for so many businesses in the state. And the last one is our proof of concept fund, really looking at what does it mean to deploy equity checks from $50,000 to $100,000 into those type of groundbreaking companies. So those kind of the programs the dollars that we deploy, we're also responsible for SBIR and STTR in the state.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so SBIR, STTR is essentially the opportunity to go to federal agencies who have an R&D arm, and they fund certain products or businesses or services that can help a particular mandate within that federal agency.
Okay.
So we try to create a support system so businesses who might be eligible for a Department of Defense or Department of Agriculture RFP to put together not only the product but the business case to warrant and generate the funding from those federal agencies. So those are kind of the big ways that we think about deploying funding from our own programs to just a larger statewide strategy. It's really interesting because I talk a lot about groundbreaking companies, but I owned a coffee roasting company and a coffee shop here in New Haven. So it's interesting from my perspective to see the opportunities that me as a small business owner had to get capital and really the lack of opportunities. I mean, when we opened up our coffee shop, we had to do a Kickstarter campaign to get the money to do it because, you know, coffee and coffee shops and brick and mortars, there is just a certain conservative manner in which financiers approach deploying capital for traditional businesses like that. And I think like everything I try to do, we try to be a little different. And that differentiator, I think certain banks and other financial institutions didn't see as enough to warrant, you know, a loan or anything of that nature. So we went to the people and said, hey, if you want us in New Haven, put together $100, and over 35 days we raised over $40K to get it done. So from that to like helping other folks raise pre-seed, Series A, helping them with their decks and introducing them to VCs, it's been really fascinating being on the small business side of things, the groundbreaking business side of things in terms of raising and fundraising, and then now being an opportunity to deploy capital, seeing it from the other side.
You just mentioned like every single type of funding that I taught in this module. It's almost like it gave you a cheat sheet or something, like getting started with crowdfunding, and then awards and grants, and then venture capital and equity and loans. So like every single financial vehicle. And it sounds like CTNext funds for profits, but there are still some financial vehicles where it's like it's just an award. You can take it or a grant and you don't have to give it back. So it's not necessarily always like venture capital, like some parts of it are.
Correct. Yeah, we try to be very intentional in the way that we give grants, and really providing an opportunity to be a catalyst. So I think oftentimes, I personally think that the folks can deploy grant funding a little too early. This may be the traditional entrepreneur in me, but I do think you need to put some type of legwork in, even if it's not financial capital, to get to a point where an injection of outside capital can get you over a particular hump. So it's saying, I have someone who wants to buy my product, I don't have enough money to get my product made. That's when the grant funding really makes a lot of sense to me. I just like to see some skin in the game, some sweat equity, understanding, right, the cultural implications of primarily Black women, but underrepresented entrepreneurs, and the structural barriers that don't allow them to get access to capital as, you know, other people that have, you know, whether it's privilege or from different demographics might have easier time to get capital. And not only that, but also the geography. You know, 90+% of capital goes to folks in New York and Silicon Valley. So what are the ways in which a place in Connecticut can attract the kind of capital that's needed in order for folks to get to the next level? So definitely enjoy deploying grant money in an intentional way, and also understanding that it's helpful for folks who just don't have that network to do a friends and family round as well.
What else would you like students to know about how to navigate the ever-changing funding landscape? What advice would you have?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think we're, you know, in reviewing decks and kind of being on both sides of the table, one thing that often gets lost is people don't celebrate their wins enough in their deck and their presentation. So I've seen, you know, individuals who put together, okay, here's the problem, here's my solution, here's the total addressable market, here's how much I'm raising, here's the product I have, aka the solution, but they're not mentioning that they already have 200K in revenue and 5 MOU signed, right? And I think milestones for me, it's like show that you were able to attract resources and have clear wins no matter how big or small. I think that's so helpful. And also as an entrepreneur, it's easier to get funding on your own terms if you can show that you're going to be successful with or without this particular investor's check. So knowing the ways to kind of leverage your own success into better terms early on, I think is so helpful. Another point, understanding and having a clear idea, this is for venture specifically, venture backable companies, having a clear idea of what funds have an investment thesis that is in line with their company. I think oftentimes people cast too wide of a net, and no VC wants to say no to next billion-dollar company, so they're gonna drag you through a couple meetings to do this due diligence, do all these things. But I think if you do a lot of research early on to understand, okay, this type of investor invests in companies like mine, so maybe that side of their portfolio is either full and they don't want other competitors in that fund, or at least I can reach out to them to see, hey, maybe you're excited about me as this company XYZ as also a player in this sector, and kind of spread out the risk in this particular area. So I think those are the two big ones. And then, obviously just networking, getting as many contacts and kind of warm intros as you possibly can. But especially now with the way the market is generally, it's a tough time for people to raise funds, for fund managers to raise funds, and it's a tough time to get VC funding, which I think the market needed a course correction for some time. So, if you have a good product, you can make your way through the noise.
Are there any tools or templates that you've used or that people you've worked with have used to organize how they're going to navigate this landscape, and like at what stage in their life cycle is each resource appropriate to approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's a must-have, right? Like a great customer relationship management software, and it can just be an Excel spreadsheet, but especially when you're going to raise, who you talk to, when you talk to them, do they want to follow on? Do you want to follow on with them? When's the last time you contacted them? What are the notes you have from that conversation? I think keeping that very streamlined. So again, you're not running in circles, but rather you have the opportunity to know and prioritize what can eventually get you to your goal of X dollars raised. I've seen people do Excel spreadsheets. I've seen people do Airtable. I've seen people use a lot of different management softwares. I say the best one is whichever one you can commit to. And I think one thing I really like is, I know they have it with Dropbox and DocSend, but sending your pitch deck in a way where you can always just update it on the back end. And it's important to know that whoever sees it needs to put in their email in order to get to it. And I think that's just helpful to understand who has their eyes on your stuff. I mean, even down to metrics on what slides people spent the most time on. I mean, really in-depth stuff that can be helpful in understanding, okay, well, they can either spend a lot of this time on the slide because it's interesting or because they're confused by it, and then asking for that feedback.
That's a good point.
So it's those things where it's like, again, there's an art to it as much as it is a science, and being able to just stay organized throughout the arduous process, I think is crucial to your success.
I like the idea of sending out your slide deck in a way that it's can't get outdated, and you don't have to send it again if it changes. It's like a link that you can just update, and then you can also track who's spending time on it.
Yep.
I really like that. I'm going to have to get even more tips from you later. Thank you so much, Oni. I feel like this has been extremely valuable, and you're a wealth of knowledge about entrepreneurship and funding, and we're so grateful for you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Of course.